What's up, everybody, and welcome to Pizza and Pixels. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, aka HexxedPhenom, and I am typically joined by my co-host, JP, but unfortunately, because of scheduling conflicts and because of a winter storm we had where we're at recently, things didn't work out this week, but I wanted to make sure that you guys still got an episode going up as it normally does on every other Saturday at noon Eastern time at youtube.com/HexxedPhenom or on podcast services around the globe. And of course, this is the gaming podcast where myself and JP order a pizza and talk about video games until that pizza shows up. But with that being said, because of scheduling conflicts, JP could not make it today. So I wanted to do a more of a somewhat evergreen topic that isn't, super news heavy from this week or from, I guess, the past 2 weeks technically. But yeah. So what we decided to do is I am going to talk about the things that I want to see from the Spider-Man sequel game that I would say is just about confirmed at this point. I mean, it's the fastest selling exclusive on PS4. I believe it's close to being the best-selling exclusive on PS4. It broke a ton of records for Sony. I believe at the time that it came out, it was the fastest-selling digital game. I think that was then beaten twice in the coming months by Black Ops 4 and then again by Red Dead Redemption 2. But still, this game is an absolute juggernaut. It made a ton of money. It sold extremely well, had an amazing fan base, and I mean, granted, while it is up to, Marvel and Sony, I'd say that it's just about confirmed that we're going to get a sequel to this game. So with that being said, I want to talk about all of the things that I want to see come out of Spider-Man 2, whether that be, where I want the story to go, any specific suits I want to see, gameplay changes, mechanic changes, just anything in general that has to do with Spider-Man 2 that I would love to see come to the game. And I asked JP to text me some of the things that he wanted to see in the game, so I will be reading those off at some point during the episode as well. But with that being said, before we really get into the swing of things, I just wanted to let you guys know that I will be talking major story spoilers for the first game. So if you guys haven't finished Marvel's Spider-Man on PS4 and you are still concerned about the story, then I would click off of this video and wait until you finish Spider-Man to come back and watch this. But with that being said, we are going to get right into it. And I don't really know what structure I'm going to follow for this. So I think just for right now, I'm going to start off just by reading what JP had to say, because I know what he said was pretty brief. So this is what JP had to say when I asked him what he wanted to see in Spider-Man 2, or whatever Insomniac decides to call it. He said, realistically, I just want to see them expand on the masterpiece they created in Spider-Man, and add in Venom, along with some more notable villains to keep it fresh. Hell, even if they made all 3 islands playable in the next game, that would be a huge plus, and would also add a ton more stuff to do. The possibilities are endless, but as long as they keep the ball rolling and have fresh ideas, the sequel will be just as good as the original, if not better. And I think that's a great way to boil it down in, just a text message. But obviously, I mean, this is a podcast. We can't just, leave it at that and have a 4-minute podcast. So I'm going to, take those ideas and as well as some of my own ideas and expand on that and let you guys know what I want to see in Spider-Man 2. So with that being said, one of the first things I'm going to start off with is the thing that I could probably talk about the least, and that is new, gameplay mechanics that I would like to see. And I don't really have much to say about stuff like this. I mean, just from, a basic top-down level, I would love to see more. I'm sure we're going to get, new abilities and stuff like that coming in Spider-Man 2. But I would just love to see more suit powers, more unique suit powers. I would love to see additions to the swinging system, new moves and stuff, maybe some new I'm sure they're going to be adding new animations for when you, like, launch off a web and stuff like that. But, like, new tricks that you can manually do yourself. A couple of new just web swinging mechanics would be cool. Like, I know there's this one really cool move you could do in Spider-Man 2, the game, where you could like latch yourself onto two different buildings with your webs and then pull yourself back and then like launch yourself forward super quickly. That'd be really cool to see. I think from a base level, I mean, they've already basically perfected swinging. And so all they really need to do is just kind of add on top of the systems they already have, because what they already have as a base from Spider-Man 1 is just incredible in just about every way that I could think of. And that's goes for so many different things that we're going to be talking about today. Another thing I would love to see is just, new combat mechanics, maybe some new ways to do combos, some new finishers, things like that. Just, basic stuff. But other than that, I'm not really super concerned about the mechanics. I know just based on what we've seen from the original Spider-Man that Insomniac is committed to, making everything as amazing as they possibly can. So I'm not really concerned about anything for this game, but I'm just letting you guys know what I want to see. Or what we want to see, I should say. But with that being said, the next thing I want to talk about is story. What I want to see from a story standpoint. And I'm thinking this is the thing that I'm going to talk about the most. So, once again, I will give you guys one final warning. I'm about to spoil the hell out of Spider-Man 1. Or Marvel Spider-Man on PS4, whatever. And then I'm going to be talking about what is probably, quite possibly, what could be happening in Spider-Man 2. So, I'm going to give you guys one final spoiler warning. Here, we're going to be talking about major story spoilers for Spider-Man on PS4. So, again, if you haven't finished it and you're still trying to avoid story spoilers, then I would click off the video. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that now. 3, 2, 1. All right, here come the spoilers. So, in terms of story, those of you that have played Spider-Man will know that Miles Morales is also in this universe. And towards the end of Spider-Man on PS4, Miles Morales gets bit by a spider, a radioactive spider, and we see towards the end of the main storyline progression that Miles is starting to get spider powers. We also see some glimpses of that in the DLC as well. And I think I have two different theories as to where I think this could go. And I think they kind of intertwine into each other a little bit. But I could see one of two things happening. I could see with Spider-Man 2, or again, whatever Insomniac decides to call it, that either you start the game as Peter Parker, and then something happens and you play like the second half of the game as Miles Morales as Spider-Man, or I think it'll be like a co-op type of like swap off, like pick which Spider-Man you play type thing. And not in the sense that like, okay, you start the story and you have to stay as one Spider-Man or the other, but kind of like a GTA 5 story scenario where you could just swap between Spider-Men at will. And I think that'd be really awesome, which either way they decide to go with it. I think one thing that would be really cool, and I don't know if they'll end up doing this, but this kind of goes into which villains I would like to see in Spider-Man 2. It's just about confirmed that we will be seeing, at the very least, Venom and some form of the Green Goblin, possibly the Hobgoblin, but Yeah. So it's basically all but confirmed that Harry Osborn is going to be Venom and Norman Osborn is going to be the Green Goblin. And so one thing that I think would be kind of cool, I mean, I hope Venom and the Green Goblin are like the two main bad guys, and that uh, the end fight is Venom and Green Goblin up against, Peter Parker and Miles Morales as, Spider-Man. But one thing that I also think would be a really cool thing that people wouldn't see coming is if you fight Venom at like the middle point of the game, so like the end of Act 2 per se, as Peter Parker, and then the symbiote latches on to Peter, turns him evil, and then you have to play as Miles for the rest of the game and basically try to save Peter from the symbiote, which I think would also be really cool. I don't really have a preference on where they go for that. I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards the final boss fight of Venom and Green Goblin against the two Spider-Men. But like I said, I don't really have a preference either way as to where they go with that. I think both would be incredibly badass, but yeah. With that being said, I don't know. I'm really excited to see what they do with Miles Morales. I really hope that he is playable. And not in the way that he was playable in Spider-Man 1 with the stealth sequences and everything. I think it would be a really interesting concept to, maybe if they do something like that you could choose to go into certain missions as either Peter or Miles, and they have their different skill sets, and you can use them to your advantage in different ways in the same mission. Or I think it'd be cool if there was certain missions that you had to play as Miles, and like he'd probably have a different fighting style since, he's not as trained as Spider-Man, as Peter Parker Spider-Man, but also that he has a different skill set that you can utilize, but that there's like some skills that you have as Peter Parker that you need to learn as Miles, and having two separate skill trees for each Spider-Man I think would be, for each version of Spider-Man between Miles and Peter would be really cool, I think. There's a lot of cool stuff they can do. One thing I kind of hope that I mean, I'm sure Insomniac will do it justice regardless of what happens, but one thing I hope doesn't happen, at least in Spider-Man 2, is I hope that Peter doesn't die. And mostly just because, I mean, I don't know, because I'm such a huge fan of the way that Yuri Lowenthal portrayed Peter Parker in Marvel Spider-Man for PS4 that I really don't want to see him, be finished with the role just yet. So I would love to at least see him be like a full part of the complete Spider-Man 2 at the very least. Also, guys, I know I'm kind of jumping around to so many different like points here, but I'm just so incredibly excited for this game, and we don't even really know if it's coming out. I could be hyping myself up for nothing, but I'm just so excited. But with that being said, yeah, other villains that I think are, I'd say, a safe bet is Chameleon, because he was referenced in Marvel Spider-Man. We don't see him, but Peter Parker did say something about him. There also were references to the Sandman. I don't know if he's still around, if he still has powers, but I wouldn't put it past him being in the game. We've also heard mention of Mysterio in the game, I believe. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Mysterio, but at the same time, I kind of would hope that they would give Mysterio more of like a leading role. And I feel like this game is, I feel like Spider-Man 2 is kind of set up to have the Green Goblin and Venom as their like lead villains. And I would like to see Mysterio as a lead villain, but also at the same time, I think that's kind of the role he's going to be filling in Spider-Man Far From Home, which is the MCU movie that's coming out in July of this year, I believe. So, I don't know, but I would really love to see a really good video game adaptation of Mysterio, where he gets more of like a lead role, because granted, I haven't played every Spider-Man game to date, but the most memorable one for me was Spider-Man 2, with like the whole funhouse sequences, but even then, I don't remember them being that fun. I don't really remember off the top of my head, though. I haven't played that game in a long time. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Mysterio make an appearance of some kind. I guess if we're going to have Chameleon, Kraven would also make sense, because I believe they're brothers, right? Depending on, I guess, I don't know if it depends, actually, on which comics you read, but I'm pretty sure they're related somehow. What else? I think that probably covers most of it, but I feel like the only reason Spider-Man 1 had so many villains was mostly just to get the whole Sinister Six thing across. So I'm not sure we'll see as many villains in Spider-Man 2. I feel like it might end up just being Venom, Green Goblin, and spoilers for the third. Well, I guess technically I'll also warn you guys now that I'm about to spoil the DLC stories as well. So if you haven't played those and are concerned about story spoilers for the DLC packs for Spider-Man on PS4, then I would click away. I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. But I can't think of her name. Yuri Watanabe, the police chief that Spider-Man associates himself with throughout the game. Basically during the second and third DLC pack, the dog is barking, that's cool. During the second and third DLC pack, Yuri basically like goes crazy and starts like, you find out in the third DLC pack through some side missions that Yuri actually like started just straight up went crazy and started murdering people. And I can't think for the life of me what her villain name is, because I remember reading about it that she's turns into some sort of villain, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But it wouldn't surprise me if I wouldn't even call her a main villain. She'll probably be cleared out within the first act or so. I don't see her being like the final villain or anything like that, or like the main villain. But whatever her villain name is, which I apologize, I can't remember. And then Venom and Green Goblin, I think, are going to be the main two big villains to worry about. But Yuri, that storyline also does hold a lot of, personal connection to Peter, but I don't think it holds enough to overshadow Norman and Harry Osborn. Especially considering the circumstances behind that whole, relationship between them two, or I guess three, with being Peter, Norman, and Harry. But I don't know, man. I'm just so excited. I don't really have, now that I think about it, I don't really have any specific suits that I can think of off the top of my head that I would want to see. We got a really great selection in Marvel Spider-Man. By the way, if you haven't seen it, I did a list ranking all 40 suits that are currently in the game from worst to best, in my own opinion. If you want to check that out, I will link it down in the podcast description as well as the video description. But you can check it out regardless at youtube.com/HexxedPhenom. But we got a great selection of suits in the original Spider-Man. I've been going back and forth on if I want like every suit to be new or which ones I want them to bring back from Marvel Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 2, and what they're going to do. And if we're going to play as Miles, Miles Morales is a part of Spider-Man lore that I am not super familiar with. I've never really read any Miles comics. I mean, I don't really read a lot of comics in general, but I'm not 100% sure how many different suits Miles has. I'm sure at the very least, assuming Miles is playable, I'm sure at the very least we'll have, like, you know, a Miles Morales version of the advanced suit, like probably just the advanced suit, but palette swap to black and red, as opposed to red, blue, and white, which, now that I think about it, would look dope as hell. But probably something like that. Probably like, I don't know how many different versions of Miles Morales there is in the comics, but I'd say there's at least 2 or 3. Probably way more. Like, it's probably an insane amount of suits that from Miles that I don't know about. But I'd say there's probably going to be at least 2 or 3 suits that are just like Miles is like default suit from different comic runs. And then it wouldn't surprise me if we see the Miles Morales is like Into the Spider-Verse costumes as well. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with Miles Morales as Spider-Man. So if there's any specific Miles suits you guys want to see, let me know down in the comments below of the video version, or if your podcast service of choice supports commenting, then let me know there as well. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about Miles suits. Like I said, that's a big kind of blank point for me. As for Peter Parker suits, I feel like they kind of covered a majority of the super iconic, super classic, you know, Spider-Man suits. I mean, the only ones I can think of that I saw a lot of people requesting was, I mean, I'm sure by the time the game comes out, we'll probably get the 2 new suits that they have shown so far for Spider-Man Far From Home. And if there's any other suits that are new in that movie, I'm sure we'll see them as well. By then, I'm assuming this game won't come out until, I don't know. See, they have the groundwork laid out now, but at the same time, because I believe, if I remember correctly from interviews, they said that this game took about 3.5 years to make, which is absolutely impressive considering how amazing this game is. But so it took them like 3.5 years to make this game basically from scratch. I believe they had to make this on a completely new engine and everything. So now that they have the engine done, you know, they have the city, at least like the baseline like look and feel of the city. They have the swinging mechanics, they have combat mechanics, they have, you know, all of this groundwork laid out. Granted, I'm, you know, in school to become a game developer, but I'm not super involved in it yet. I don't really know how long it takes to make a game. Just based on what I see from, you know, keeping up with news in the game industry, I'd say if they really wanted to, they probably could push this game out to be a launch title for the PS5, assuming, I should say, that the PS5 is going to come out when it's rumored to be coming out, which right now is holiday 2020. So that would give them about 2 years to, you know, come up with, you know, whatever they need to do to come up with. But I'd say that's if they like rush to put it together, which I don't want them to do. As excited as I am for this game, I want Insomniac to take their time and make it the best possible experience that it needs to be. And that's what I loved about the original Spider-Man is they didn't announce a date until they were, set in stone, like, hey, we are launching this day. It's not getting delayed. This is when it comes out. And while it would be awesome to see Spider-Man 2 be a launch title for the PS5, I also wouldn't mind if it didn't come out until a year and a half into the console cycle, because I know that when it comes out, when Insomniac is ready to put it out, it's going to be a fantastic game, if the first one's anything to go by. So, I would say a safe bet for this game is probably holiday 2021, I would assume. But regardless, I'm excited for this game. And to go back to one thing that JP was talking about earlier, was he was saying about possibly including the other islands of New York onto the map. And I think it'd be pretty interesting, actually, because, I mean, one of the things with Spider-Man is it's so hard for him to get around outside of, like, Manhattan, because, I mean, if there's not skyscrapers, he doesn't really have anything to swing on, which is a nice dynamic sometimes, especially, and I like when it's explored in the movies. I don't know if it'll mess with the flow of the game in any way, but I think if there's a good narrative reason for it, and not just, hey, these places are here just because, then I think it would be really cool to see the other, boroughs and islands of New York added, like Queens, Brooklyn, stuff like that. Especially because I believe Miles, well, I don't know about in Insomniac's universe, but I believe Miles normally is from Brooklyn in the comics, right? So maybe if there's a narrative reason for it, it would be cool. I also could see, going back to the villains for a second, now that I think about it, I could see the Prowler showing up, because that is Miles Morales' uncle normally in the comics, so that could be an interesting villain to see show up at some point, especially to have Miles fight his uncle. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, if there's narrative reason for it, I would love to see the other islands and boroughs of New York added. And like GP was saying, more side activities to do. As much as I loved this game, I feel like the really only thing that dampened it for me was some of the side activities. There's only so much you can do with a Spider-Man game in terms of side activities. I mean, I understand that. But if there's any way to, find some new ones, or to put different interesting variations on the ones we already have, maybe some new challenges, some different challenges. Please, for the love of God, don't bring Screwball back. Please, just don't do it. I'm trying to think what could really be done, but just if they add on to some of them, make different variations, make them a little bit more interesting, I think they could really be improved upon. Not to say that they're bad, but there is still some room for improvement. Like I said, I don't really know exactly what they could do, but all right, I think the next place I'm going to go is a place that most people probably won't even consider talking about when they're talking about Spider-Man 2 for PS4 or 5 or whenever it comes out. But that is photo mode. And now, if you guys didn't know, I am certified addicted to photo mode in Spider-Man PS4. I, at one point on my PS4, had taken over like 2,200 screenshots, 2,200 screenshots of Spider-Man PS4 using photo mode. Now, granted, a lot of those were like, I think I had gone through, I went through a main story completion, a second main story completion before they introduced New Game Plus, and wait, yeah. So I did 2 full 100% story completions before they added New Game Plus. Then when New Game Plus came out, I did one, two, I think I did 5 or 6 New Game Plus completions of the game. And I just recently started another New Game Plus. I probably won't finish it, but pretty much after the first New Game Plus completion, all of the other ones were just to take photos in photo mode. And actually, the second normal story completion before they added New Game Plus was also to take screenshots in photo mode. Because I didn't realize, I mean, I'm glad I didn't realize it, but I didn't realize on my original playthrough of the game that you could stop the story cutscenes and go into photo mode, which I'm glad about, because I know if I knew that from the start, I would have ruined the story for me by having people say like 2 words and then stopping for a screenshot and then letting the cutscene roll through again and like letting someone get a sentence in and then pausing it for another screenshot. So I'm glad that I didn't find out that you could actually stop story cutscenes for screenshots until pretty much the end of my first original playthrough. But the only real things that I can think of to improve photo mode is the only thing I could really think of is maybe allow us to move just a little bit further away with the like free camera, because right now you can only move like a certain distance away from Spider-Man. I think it'd be really cool to be able to take like long off distant shots of you like swinging through the city and stuff. Other than that, just, you know, like more filters, more camera settings. Like I know they have like you could change like the exposure and the vignette settings and like the film grain strength and size and all that. Just maybe a couple more, like maybe if people wanted to change the aperture of the camera lens or whatever, or things like that. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure there'll be different stickers based on, you know, the characters that are involved in that game and the villains and some stuff like that. A couple of more selfie poses would be cool. Because when you put the camera in selfie mode right now, I think there's only like 4 or 5 different poses that Spidey can do. There's one of him just like running, I think. There's one of him like falling, like basically skydiving. There's one of him when he's like just perched on a ledge. What else? I can't think of the other ones right now. But there are some situations where you'll be doing something like if you're, say you're fighting somebody and you go into photo mode, like you're fighting an enemy, and then you go into photo mode and turn it to selfie mode. You could be in the normal camera like jumping off somebody's head, but in selfie mode it's just Spidey like running in midair. So maybe a couple of more unique selfie poses. I'm not 100% sure exactly what they would do for a selfie of Spidey fighting somebody anyway, but I just like to see what they could do with something like that. And then one thing that I like, or one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently that I think would be really, really awesome is, and if you guys aren't subscribed on YouTube, we have a YouTube exclusive series over there, youtube.com/HexxedPhenom, where JP and I play through some retro games called Retro Redux. And recently I started streaming the skate games on the PlayStation 3. And one of my favorite features in that game is there's like a constant replay function that is always recording what you're doing in the background. And it'll let you replay like the last 30 to 60 seconds of whatever you just did, no matter what it was, whether it was a cool trick, whether you bailed and like broke your neck, whatever it was. And you could go in there, you could do all this crazy stuff, like you could change the speed, you could um, do like a follow camera where you like zoom and pan out real far, but it still follows you. You could do like a tripod camera where you set it up. So like let's say if I did something where I did like a really nice grind down this long rail, I could set like a tripod cam on the like at the middle of the rail, and it'll show my skater coming down, grinding, and then the camera will pan and follow my skater down as it, as he continues to grind down the rail. And I would love to see something similar to that in Spider-Man, and I don't know if it's really worth it. If it's going to affect the performance of the game, then I'd say just don't even worry about it. And I'm sure no one from Insomniac's ever going to see this anyway. But one thing that I think would be awesome, would be absolutely incredible, is the PS4 has a built-in share function where you could save videos. You can change it in the console settings, but you could just save clips anywhere from like, I think there's different settings all the way from like the last 30 seconds all the way to the last 60 minutes. So one thing I would love to see is something similar to that, like a replay editor. So like let's say I don't know, let's say you just went to like an active crime and you did a sick combo and you did a bunch of finishers and all this cool stuff. I think it'd be awesome if you could like just edit a bunch of clips together of like, getting like sky shots of like looking down on Spidey beating up people, and then have it pan like down this way and like rotate around as Spidey's doing like a finisher, have it like rotate around him, and then like have it pan out here to show him like throwing somebody off a building and stuff. Like, just the possibilities for that are endless, and I think it would take up so much of my hard drive space if that was a thing. But like I said, if it's going to affect the performance of the game to be constantly recording what you're doing in engine, to be able to go in and, mess with the camera and everything, then that's where I'd say, don't even bother with it. But I think that'd be something that's absolutely awesome, and that's something that I would love to see. And that's something that I kind of wish a couple of more games did, because I'm sure there's other games that have done it, but the Skate franchise is one of the only games that I can think of that's done it super well. But what else? I don't know, guys. I'm kind of running near the end of my list of ideas here for Spider-Man 2. Regardless, I am incredibly excited for Spider-Man 2 to come out. Like I said, my prediction is probably holiday 2021. But I also could see it being a launch title for the PS5. I don't know, though. I feel like Sony's smart enough to let Insomniac decide that if Insomniac thinks that it's done and that it's ready to be a launch title for the PS5, then fantastic. But I'm hoping that Sony would be smart enough to be like, hey, as much as it would be cool and as much as it would sell a ton of consoles to have this as a launch title, we understand it's not ready, so we'll, give you the time to perfect it. And Sony's been really good with that during the PS4 era, especially. I think one of the only PS4 exclusives that came out and kind of flopped was Drive Club. And I don't even necessarily think it was because it wasn't ready. I just think it was... I think there was a couple of major problems with that game. The release structure of it, was it always online? I don't remember. But I know there was a lot of the online functions weren't working for a while. But yeah, there was a couple of different things with that game that made it, kind of flop. But I think that's really the only PlayStation exclusive that, and even then, it still sold pretty freaking well, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I don't know. Guys, regardless, I'm super excited for Spider-Man 2. Um, I apologize that it wasn't structured any better. Um, I guess makes it kind of hard to stay kind of focused on one thing when JP is not here to keep me on track because of my ADD. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed my 40-minute tangent about all of the crazy new features and story beats and stuff that I want to see from Spider-Man 2, or like I said, whatever Insomniac decides to call it. If you guys want to, leave some comments, let me know what you guys want to see from Spider-Man 2. I am super, super excited to see what you guys think and what you guys want to see from the game, all that stuff. But with that being said, guys, this has been episode 3 of Pizza and Pixels, the gaming podcast where JP and I order a pizza and talk about video games until that pizza shows up. But it goes live every other Saturday at noon Eastern on youtube.com/HexxedPhenom as a video version and an MP3 version on podcast services around the globe. Things like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, really any podcast service of your choosing. With that being said, guys, until next time, another one bites the crust.